Hello and welcome to the Rad Dad Show. This is your host, Kirill Zubovsky. Today my guest on the show is Aubrey Johnson. Aubrey is a designer living in Charleston, South Carolina. He works remotely for a company out of Austin, while him and his wife are raising their family and homeschooling them as well. Aubrey's got a very interesting past where, before becoming a designer, he was a mechanic in the Air Force, but then he transitioned and became a digital designer, and eventually ran a business of his own where for a couple of years he was a full-time designer doing everything from sales to actual work. Today on the show, Aubrey and I are going to talk about freelancing, remote work, homeschooling, and what parenting is like in his situation. To start, let's find out why, while so many designers live in Silicon Valley, Aubrey and his family decided to move to the East Coast.
The real reason we live here is to buy a house and to be close to family. We're real close to family, and we like the beach. My son, his name is Jet. He's 7.5, and my daughter, her name is Sydney, and she's 4.5. The Southeast, I mean, it's definitely it's got its quirks for sure, but no place is perfect, and we like that aspect of it. Being close to family, having those memories, that means a lot to us. So it's worth a couple of the caveats that come with being here.
Do you miss the weather?
Oh man, that's the biggest one. But after a few months, you get more used to it. But I don't think once you know about like West Coast weather, you never can be content with it here like you were before you knew about West Coast weather, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, that
yeah.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, once you've had West Coast weather, it's like the promised land of weather. It's like, oh, but it's so good there all the time. It's so perfect. And before we moved back east, we were in Orange County, which I would argue is maybe the best weather in America, Southern California.
I think real estate prices in Orange County would agree with you.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why we left. We were like, well, $1 million for this dump? No way. Let's get out of here.
$1 million? Where did you find such a cheap house in Orange County?
I know, right? I think it was like a condo or something. Yeah, yeah, it's got its pros and cons, but that weather was, you don't need to be in your house that much, really, if you got nice weather all the time.
I didn't know you were in the Air Force. Was that before kids?
It was before kids. It was in between first try, rookie attempt at college, and then going back to college and actually getting decent grades. Yeah, I didn't really know what to do. I wasn't doing very good in school. I didn't really have that figured out. I didn't know how to be a student, and so I needed some discipline. And I felt like I'd lived this kind of pretty relaxed, and I felt like I lived in a place in a country that things were pretty easy compared to others, and I felt a little bit of a sense of debt to that, and so I wanted to serve, and that was a way to do it, and it had some other real tangible benefits too, like getting some discipline and maybe having money to go back to college if that was what I wanted to do one day, and to learn some skills that I wasn't going to learn anywhere else.
How long did it take?
So I was in for 6 years total. I was a diesel engine mechanic on the flight line. So I worked on the support equipment for the aircraft. And I was 2 years in the active duty, and I got in like right after 9/11. And shortly after 9/11, I think the government realized they had a little bit too many people in the military when they realized we weren't going to do World War III or whatever they were planning for. And so they had this program where you could switch to the reserve, and I thought that looked great because I was. While I appreciated my time, I was ready to not be a mechanic anymore, outside every day and having, dirt under my fingernails every night. I think I was like, this is an honest living, but it's not really what I want to do long term. And
wait, when you say switch to the reserve, does it mean you otherwise can't leave, or
yeah, I mean,
when you get to retain benefits?
Well, when you join the military, you sign a contract. You either sign in most cases you sign a 4 or 6 year contract, and yeah, you can't leave. You have to finish. I mean, you could quit, but it's not a good. It's not good if you quit. It's bad. It's really bad for your long term. You know, that stuff goes on, follows you around with your credit score. It's hard to get a home loan. I think there's a lot of stuff that comes along with just quitting that job. It's not easy to quit. You really have to finish what you start there. But they had a transition program where you could join the reserve and you would do, yeah, retain your benefits and, be in favorable standing with the government, with the military. And I took that.
That's pretty convenient.
It,
Yeah.
it worked out pretty awesome. Yeah.
Wait, so, well, what I want to know really is, life of Aubrey and how you became a dad and kind of all the cool things you learned and what you can teach other parents about parenting. But also,
Mm.
uh, while we're here, so how did you go from being in the military, a mechanic, to a designer in California?
Well, that's a good question. So, like, I I, I knew I didn't want to be a, a flight line diesel engine mechanic for 20 years, and when I was able to transition to the reserve, I went back to school, and I was going to go to law school. That was my plan. I thought that seems like a pretty good profession, and it looked interesting. But then when I dug into it, I thought, well, I think I actually don't want to be a lawyer. And around that same time that was going on, I was taking some electives in interface design and I think it was like an introduction to web programming course as electives. And I had done that stuff as a middle schooler, just tinkering around, nothing serious. And and I was doing pretty well in the classes, and I really liked it. And I found out you could do well in that profession, if you committed yourself to it. And so I got a degree in graphic design, and then I got another degree in an undergrad in web and interactive media design, and then after that I joined Twilio. And so I had kind of started going to school to be a designer and a multidisciplinary designer, and then I got some gigs that just it kind of kept going. Things kept going and getting better and better, and I really liked it. Didn't feel like work.
Yeah, well, especially after fixing airplanes or,
Yeah, being outside and doing I guess it's like a hard labor job almost in some cases. It's intense labor at certain times. Yeah, switching from that to a desk job, uh, yeah, that was pretty cushy in comparison for sure.
So you mentioned Twilio, and I remember there was this kind of a blip with a Twilio that happened to you. Did you want to talk about that?
What happened with Twilio?
Well, remember how like family was really important to you, and so instead of staying in Twilio for
Oh
12
yeah,
months,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll talk about that. So I left Atlanta to go to Twilio. I was actually dating a different gal than my wife, and I I got homesick. I really wanted to go back to Atlanta while I was at Twilio, and this at this point there were only 5 people at Twilio. I was the second employee there, and the three founders, and then Danielle Marill was there before me. And it was a great company. Everybody there was super nice. I learned so much, but I just couldn't shake that homesickness. And so I went back to Atlanta, and the gal I was dating that fizzled out pretty quick. And then I met my wife, and I guess this doesn't have too much to do with being a dad or anything, the Twilio thing, but I think it was my beginning of prioritizing relationships over financial gain or positions in companies or things like that. And I think really that was the start of that sort of thinking and those sort of decisions. So that's
Right, but
relevant.
mhm.
Yeah.
But also for all the designers and freelancers and people thinking about startups listening to this. In the end of the day, it took Twilio over 10 years to
Oh yeah.
IPO.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you stayed there as that second employee, right, one of the five people, etc., you would have made some money, but it would have taken a really, really long time. So, in hindsight, like, how do you feel about this? Would you advise people to maybe consider and hang out for longer, or like how did it work out in the long run for
Well,
you?
well, some money and a lot of money, in my opinion, are two different things. And it was a lot of money. I think the total number of shares for my initial, and this is so long ago, I don't care who knows about this stuff now, but I think it was like 150,000 shares with a strike price of like, a fraction of a penny. So we're talking at Twilio's peak in millions of dollars of value in equity. And that's not, there's dilution and stuff. Maybe it'd be considerably less, but I would have a lot have a lot more money than I have today for sure if I had stuck around for that. So I guess that's the first part of that. But ultimately, by leaving Twilio, I was able to meet my wife, and then we started our family, and all of that's worth way more than a few $1,000,000. To me, I wouldn't do it any differently, even if I could see the paths in front of me. I'd take the family route.
Hi there. I'm glad you're enjoying this episode of The Rad Dad Show. While you're listening, if you can take a moment and share this episode with your friends or leave us a review on iTunes, that would really help. The link is in the episode details. Thanks, and let's get back to the show. Then I knew you, what was it, about 2012. You were a freelancer, and you stayed as a freelancer for quite a long time, right? You're not
Yeah.
freelancing right now, are you?
No, in fact, I just stopped freelancing in March. But I wasn't doing it the way, well, yeah, I did it for like I did it for real for like 3 years. When we met, I was at Color, and I was definitely doing things on the side when I had time. I was working for a lot of YC companies. I think around the time we met was when I was doing Authy, and then I did some work with Andrew Mason with Detour. Um, and the old Bop was another one. They ended up getting acquired. So I had a good relationship with companies that were going through YC. I think through knowing Gary, or somebody there was saying nice stuff about me. Which, if you're listening to this now, I'm like, thanks. I really appreciate that. And those relationships were really formative. But I wasn't doing full time freelance until after science. And you mentioned what I might say to startup folks or freelancers thinking about startup life. I guess we could talk a bunch about different things I've learned over time. But after science, I joined a couple of companies. I wasn't there very long. I really liked that variety of being the DIR at science. I worked on about maybe 36 to 38 different companies, something like that.
Just to
Over the
clarify, so
Yeah,
that's designer in residence?
that's right. Yeah. So I was a science. I was part of the team at Science that helped the portfolio companies, and my investment into them was usually through like design capital, sweat equity for the most part, um, to contribute to those company successes. And I was doing all kinds of stuff, full on product work, um, helping them hire designers, mediating relationships between engineers and designers, doing products internally for science, all, you name it, a whole bunch of stuff. It really was like such a great variety of work at science, and probably spoiled me a little bit too. And so when I left science, I went and I worked at another startup in LA, and great team. It's called a company called WorkPop, and they do like LinkedIn for I guess lack of a better term, like blue collar workers. A lot of retail and food and beverage folks don't really have a way to document their work history, and they have kind of an inverse job market. versus technology. They usually have one job with a lot of applicants versus, few applicants for many jobs in startups. And so I worked there for like an embarrassingly short amount of time. It was only one thing. I was like, these folks are great. This is a great company, but I just want that variety. And then I joined an agency. I didn't do that for very long. That was a whoopsie. And then I started my own thing. And I thought, I'll go to an agency. They get variety. That was not. That was a mistake.
Variety of you got to pick the color of the buttons you could put on the screen.
I mean, barely even that. I think they're good folks at that agency, but it was not the kind of work that I was seeking. And they were, again, really nice. It wasn't anything like, a bad relationship or anything personal. It was more just like, this nature of this work isn't for me. And when I saw the billables and how many people were working on projects, I thought, from the business side, I thought, well, why am I'm doing 90% of this work and taking about 15%, maybe 10% of this income. So that seems like a little weird. And I was doing some of the pitches too. So I knew I could pull the business. And so that's when I decided to start my own thing. And I did that for about 3 years. And my wife was really sketched out. She was like, what are we going to, like, what if you don't get clients? And I said, I don't know. And she said, what are we going to do for healthcare? So we're going to buy it. And she said, isn't it really expensive? And I said, yeah, it's awfully expensive, honestly, but we're going to do it. And we're going to take some risks and see how it goes. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I could have made for a lot of reasons.
While we're here, does your wife work, or is she home with kids most of the time?
So my wife, she does work. She works extremely hard. I would say she works harder than I do. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she also homeschools our son, who's in first grade. He'll be in second grade after the summer. I know. And she balances my daughter, who's not in school yet. She keeps her, her mind active and doing things too. And I don't know how she does it. She's awesome. I couldn't do what she does. Her job's hard, super hard.
We'll circle back to freelancing in a second, but I'm curious, are you guys deeply religious? Is that why you're homeschooling, or is that just a different choice?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we know a lot of homeschool people who are deeply religious. I mean, we have we have beliefs, but part of the reason, a big reason for us to homeschool is because we can. It's nice to be able to focus. From a financial standpoint, we make some sacrifices so that we can do that. My wife, it really likes to do it. She feels very fulfilled when she does this, and so because she likes to do it, I like to be able to support that from the financial side, and I do what I do, and she does what she does. But one of the things that we found that's a cool benefit of homeschool is that if our son is having a hard time on a certain aspect of his scholastics, my wife can spend more time on it. She doesn't have to kind of push along, to make the quota or whatever goes on, in a larger school system where you've got to make sure kind of everyone's getting everything they need. And then when he breezes through something, it's done and on to the next thing. And so we do it for a lot of different reasons, but I wouldn't say that like our main choice was, because we, have a belief system and we don't want to put our kid in school. I mean, I don't think I think that's silly when people do. I think that's the wrong reason to do homeschool, if you ask me.
Right. Well, that's, I was slightly facetious when I asked that, right? But I was curious because we were considering it at some point. I mean, our oldest is still only 3 years old, so maybe it's a little too early to think about it. But a lot of people have this attitude to homeschools, like, oh, well, don't do it. Your kids are going to be weird. Like, they're not going to have anyone to play with.
But we went to. Did you go to like a public or a private school growing up?
I went to public school. So
I went to public school too. Hey, there's some weird kids at public school. So like you're gonna escape weird kids. by by doing homeschool. But I think that that's kind of a long-standing challenge with homeschool is the socialization aspects, and that's actually. So you bring up a good point. If we're going to talk about philosophies, I think there's some stuff going on in schools today that's a little kooky, with the way that kids treat each other and kind of bully each other and are rough on one another psychologically more so than maybe when we were younger. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I'm not in school right now, but it seems different to me. And when you think about the workplace and the school environment, that's not really how it works. If I were to bully someone at work, I'm nuked, man. I'm out, you know? Um and if someone on my team was doing that to someone, they'd be skipping down the street on their butts. I'd kick them out so fast. But in school, that doesn't it doesn't really go that way, you know? Kind of like kids have to endure these things, and some of them are pretty like it's not something that I think people would want their kids to endure. It's not like a character building thing. It's more like torturous. And so it's kind of nice to skirt that. Now, that doesn't happen at every school. Not everybody can do homeschool. I don't think I'm some better parent or something because we have this set up for ourselves. It's just what works for our family. Some families probably couldn't be together all the time like we are. I work from home. So we're kind of like on the homestead, like a pre-industrial revolution family in a post-industrial revolution era.
Wait, so this house you guys bought, is it like a really cool farm somewhere in the boonies?
No, it's just in a regular neighborhood. It's kind of close to. It's a few blocks from we're kind of close to the coast here. It's near like the salt marshes and stuff, so we can go fishing and things down the street. But overall, no, we live in just a basic neighborhood. I think I have an office, a sectioned off office, and then there's a room in our house that's like a schoolroom, and it looks like a school. And my wife does her thing in there. Oh, and you know what I didn't mention is my son goes to a co-op for 1 day a week, and it's basically like a place for him to meet up with other kids. There's a formal teacher. It's kind of like school, but it's a lot less structured and rigid like a public school would be, if that makes sense.
Are you guys planning on doing this throughout kind of his whole education, or is it just for younger years?
Man, I'll tell you, when my wife first suggested this, I was like, hell no, you're not doing that. You have no experience. You're crazy. And that was my initial.
I'm sure that's exactly how you said that.
I think I did say it like that, and she got mad at me. And so, we're we have healthy debates like any couple does. And she we had some more longer conversations about it and talk through it more logically. But my initial reaction was, no way, you don't have any teaching experience, and this is really important. So I'm not on board with this. And then I said, okay, you know what? It's kindergarten. Here's my opinion on it, and then let's talk about that. This is what I said to my wife. I said, it's kindergarten. It's not like junior year of high school or something that's as critically important, in my opinion. So let's give it a shot. And at the end of the year, we'll have him independently and privately evaluated. And if he's on point with his peers, then we can go another year. And she said, that's a good deal. Let's do that. And so that's kind of been our operation is if he's at or above his peers, we'll go another year. And we just take it year by year right now.
That's a really beautiful way of doing it. And you introduce some accountability in there, right? It's not like you're just winging it. You're actually measuring it, which is kind of odd, but awesome. It's like you're doing a little startup at home, which is called Your Kid.
Yeah. Some of this stuff is new. Like, I think in certain states, parents can get away with being pretty lame at this. And my wife's talked to some other parents, and she'll come back and tell me what they're doing for their curriculum and stuff. And it's like, man, you're not doing your kid any favors by this, like, kind of lazy way you're doing this. And so, some people do this, and it's not a good choice. It's not a wise choice, and they have a really weird approach. and we're not perfect either, but we try to, like you said, we try to do it pretty pragmatically and with a lot of accountability and biases removed as much as we can.
Well, you'll probably have biases, but they'll be like intellectual biases introduced into the education, right, rather than removed out of it. I would suspect. But
Yeah.
honestly, we know some folks out here in Seattle who homeschool their kids, and their kids are not just on par, but probably better behaved and more intelligent and able to sustain conversations better than their peers from normal schools. And you mentioned financially too, right? I mean, if you compare it to public schools, maybe it's more expensive because basically you have one parent staying at home. But if you compare it to private schools, right, where the cost of tuition per year is like $20,000+, then, well, maybe you're even saving money.
Maybe. Yeah. I think, well, I'm still paying for public school through my taxes, but I'm just not using it. And that's fine with us. We're just doing what we think is good for our family and is going to make people, we're trying to put people into society that are better than ourselves, that better than my wife and I are. That's our goal.
Yeah. And I guess when your son is a little older, he can teach your daughter because he would have gone through all the curriculum.
Man, she already knows a lot of stuff that a lot of 4-year-olds don't know, which is pretty cool because she's in there kind of getting bits and pieces of it through osmosis. And yeah, that's an interesting um, unintended happy accident of things that have happened. She's kind of done kindergarten and first grade to some degree already for whatever, her 3 and 4-year-old mind um, can comprehend.
Yeah. And I think they probably can comprehend a lot better than we think they could.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Kids are, this is amazing. Kids are so sophisticated and they're complex, emotional people just like adults.
yeah, my wife and I like to joke that they're basically, well, we treat them as adults with constraints.
Yeah. That's a good outlook. I like that.
So you mentioned how you freelance from home or well, now you work for the company, but you're still doing it from home, and this is how you've been doing this for a while. And I want to focus a little bit more about it because remote work is sort of becoming more important again to people. But back, when I met you, we were hoping it'd be very popular and everybody would just switch and work from home, which didn't happen. But
Yeah, it's hard.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? We saw that a lot of even the best designers, the best freelancers were still taking jobs at the end of the day because of things like healthcare is expensive, right? And you kind of think that if you're freelancing, well, that's great. You're gonna like work in the morning for a couple hours, then jump in the car, go to the beach, and go surfing. But in reality, that doesn't really happen.
I wish it was like that. I have a handful of times where, I woke up. One time when we were in Southern California, my wife said, I want to go to the San Diego Zoo today. And I had to light in a forkload. I was like, let's do it. Let's just go to the San Diego Zoo. I didn't have to ask anyone. We went to the zoo all day and came home, and it didn't affect my work. But I mean, these are few and far between, right? I think if you're doing it right, you're not going to the beach every day or even pseudo frequently. It's a hard, it's not easy work in my opinion.
Right. So can you expand on that? I just want to know what it felt like for the last couple of years as you were doing all this different work, right? And like how difficult it is to be a freelancer with a family versus having a job where a lot of things are taken care of for you, and what were the benefits of both?
Yeah, so I think the first thing and the most important thing to outline is that my wife is an insanely awesome teammate, and I'm super thankful for her in my life because so many of the things that that have happened over the past few years, especially as a freelancer, were because she's understanding or we kind of come together and divide and conquer our responsibilities. So expanding more on that, I think, yeah. Well, what can I tell you about it? about that 3-year journey where I was running my own business. What are some things that you want to know?
Well, let's just start with, do you recommend it?
I recommend it for a certain type of person. If you are the kind of person who has an enormous amount of self-discipline and you have natural sales ability and you're organized, then this work could be for you. If you feel like, well, I'm okay at some of that, but maybe not so great at the other, and you really have a sober self-assessment on that, and you think maybe I'm not so good at some of those things, you're gonna have a hard time. You're gonna get into this. You might quit your great job that pays you and has all your setup hooked up for you, and you're gonna get into this and think, what have I done? Or it's gonna stop working, and it's gonna be a financially tough one, and that's a tricky one too. You really don't. You should think long and hard. I'll tell you how I transitioned though. This was helpful. I basically started full-time freelancing as I was full-time doing my other job and leaving my other job. And with for me, I have a sense of accountability to whomever's paying me a paycheck. I wasn't going to short them. They paid for their full week, their work, and they got it. And the rest of the time was my time. And so that was time with family, time where I didn't eat where I ate at my desk, or I stayed up till, I sleep 3-4 hours a night or something like that. And I'm doing some somewhat unhealthy stuff in the beginning to kind of test the water. And then when my full-time job was starting to get in the way of this, where I ran out of time, I wanted to work more on my freelance business. And financially, my well-paying full-time job was like a loss leader for me. And that's when I knew it was time to shut that off and transition to full-time freelance. So maybe for some folks out there, if that's helpful for you, if you've got the grit and you can pull 2 40-hour a week jobs, and you've got a teammate in a spouse that's or a partner, or maybe you're single or whatever, and you can pull this off, maybe then it's for you. Maybe then.
I like what you said about 2 40-hour weeks, because I think freelancing is in many ways entrepreneurship, because you are becoming a business, right? And so it's no longer just doing the design work that you enjoy. If, say, you're a designer and this is the type of work you enjoy, it's now doing the sales, the pitching, refer, like whatever it takes, right? And somebody else mentioned on the podcast how as an entrepreneur, you get the great thing is you get to pick which 80 hours a week you want to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's a great point, that you can transition actually by loading yourself with this extra work and then trying to see if you can do, and you're interested in doing, everything that it takes to do for your own business.
The thing, now that I'm talking about this, it reminds me back to the really the last couple weeks of when I had a full-time job. I had a friend in Southern California who said he also was going to go full-time freelance, and we were going to do this as a partnership. And we hadn't done anything legally or, bonded ourselves with paperwork or anything like that. But I had a pipeline of clients that were coming in, and it was more work than I could do. And so he said he was going to join. So I'm pretty much out there selling, 2 people's time. And then he bails out. He says, I don't think it's the right time for me. I'm feeling nervous about this. And I talked with my wife and I don't want to do it. And so I said, okay. And then so I went back home and I thought long and hard, which clients should I tell to beat it, and that I can't do the work. And what eventually happened was I thought, I'm not going to tell anyone to beat it. I'm going to do all this work that I signed up for 2 people for, and I'm just going to grind through this and hustle this out and do a fantastic job so that these become my clients going forward. And that's what I did. And dude, it was the hardest thing ever. It was so tough, not sleeping and presenting all this work and being on point, and being sharp, and being I was trying to deliver the work that I would pay for that with that amount of money out of my own pocket. And that's hard. That was hard to do. Um, and thanks to my friend who bailed out on me, he really he really hooked me up. It was a gift more than a curse.
Are you guys still friends?
Oh yeah, we're great friends. I love this guy. He's awesome. And it just wasn't right for him. I'm glad he didn't do it when he knew it wasn't right for him, because it would have probably been, really problematic, to have someone working with someone who wasn't all in that same way.
So, speaking of commitment, so you said that it really helped that your wife and you can split responsibilities. Can you tell us a little bit about how that worked?
Yeah, so there would be times where I would have, a heavier workload, and before I would take the clients on, or I would, kind of start on the work, I would talk with her explicitly about what it meant. I said, okay, it's going to be this app, it's this amount of work, this is what my estimate is on this, and this is how much time it's going to take. And so that means, we just basically went through the calendar and the schedule together, and I said, these weekends I'm going to work through the weekends, or I'm going to work late at night. I'm going to come down for dinner 45 minutes, and then I'm going to go back to the office. And I kind of got her sign off on it. And we'd look through it together and say, is this financially good for us? Is this, we had some goals. We wanted to buy a house. We were aggressively saving for a home. And so we looked at that, and sometimes a client would come through and the financials just weren't there in our opinions, like as we consulted on it together. And so it was like, nah, not gonna take that project right now. Just gonna let it go and keep the workload small. Or it's like, ooh, this is good, but it's a lot of hard work. So she would take on those responsibilities, like bath and bedtime, just being really present. Not quite single mom in it, but she was putting in a lot of hours and doing a lot of work on her side, and also keeping me in a positive light with the kids, which is really cool, because I'm sure it wasn't always easy to do.
So there have been days where you probably weren't there for most of the days. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there'd be days where, I would have an ultra fast breakfast with the kids and then start working, and maybe they'd see me for 45 minutes at dinner, and then that was that. But that was a short period of time. I knew that wasn't sustainable, and that's not how it is today. It's changed kind of drastically since then. Now it's much more balanced. But when we go back to, like, is this for you, this freelance life? You might have to do that hustle, and you have to think about, do you want to do that? Do you want to miss on some of that? But as things got more stable and more understandable from the business side, it was easier to say, okay, I'm running my own business. I can play trains with my son for an hour today at 11 a.m. There's no calls, there's no expectations, no one cares where I am. They just care about the work. And so then things started getting pretty cool when that was going on, you know. And the clients were
So
still getting
then,
great work. Well, they said it was good. So that made me feel good. I don't want to blow my own head up, but yeah.
so then, why go back to working for the man?
Working for the man. So um, I was working for a venture capital firm, who needed some software. They were building some software internally for their portfolio companies, and it looked like a really great opportunity. And I really wanted to work with these VCs. They were in the Bay Area. One of the guys, his name is Chi, and he led Facebook's A round and Twitter's, and he was a partner at Kleiner. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to work with this guy. But then I got to meet him, and he's just really awesome too. Not just a great venture capitalist, but also a really cool person. And so I started working with them, and then every now and then he would send me clients or projects to help portfolio companies out that were in the firm. And so he sent me this one app, and it was pretty messed up, and it needed a lot of work. And he said, can I introduce you to the CEO? And so I started working on this product, and I worked on it as a freelancer for about a year. And they kept making me offers. They were like, "Come join full time." I said, "Nah, like, no thanks. I like being able to control my time and my pretty much every aspect of my life." And the company started to I've worked it started eating up more and more of my billable hours until it was really kind of like an anchor client. And they didn't ask me to move. They didn't want me to move. It was just occasional travel to their office in Austin, Texas. And I like Austin. Austin's a cool place. And so they finally made me an offer that just looked really cool. And I thought this could be an opportunity to do something different. So I think, let me elaborate on that. When you're a full-time freelancer, you're essentially like, maybe you're a well-paid, or hopefully you're a well-paid individual contributor to a company. And you're really like a jukebox, the coins go in, the songs come out. And as far as wealth building is concerned, it's a long game to do that. And it's harder to do that. And it's hard to have, I've seen a lot of other freelancers who look like they're doing pretty well, but then they buy a lot of toys, or it looks like they're not thinking about the long game. From the outside, you never know what people have going on financially under the hood. Maybe it's fantastic and they can get the toys and have it all, right? But it's a harder game to play, I think, long term, towards retirement, towards being able to take care of your family in different financial ways than just providing for their day to day. When you're doing freelance was my discovery. And so I thought joining a company and taking some equity on that company might be, it's a risk, but it's one that could pay off in the long run.
Just don't leave before the 12 months are over.
Don't do the Twilio thing and leave before you vest and miss out on millions of bucks. Yeah, I learned that. Yeah.
Although who knows, you would have had to maintain the taxes on those shares, and unless Twilio had the good plan in place, which they probably did not back in the day, you would eventually lost it all anyway. So,
maybe. Yeah, if I didn't do the 83B election and all that, I could have. It's hindsight's always 2020, and I think again the transaction was, in retrospect, give away millions of dollars and get a family, and to me that was a sweet deal. I made out like a bandit on that deal because my family's worth more than a few $1 million to me.
Yeah, it sounds pretty rad. So knowing everything you know now and giving this fabulous path you took, from a mechanic to a designer, it's kind of weird, right? And,
right.
and awesome.
Yeah.
And between freelancing and full-time gigs and moving coast to coast, all things considered, if there were a few things you'd want to recommend for folks to do differently, if they're thinking about a family, if they just started a family, for somebody who maybe is in your shoes, like maybe they're in the Air Force, or maybe they're individual contributor somewhere, what would be the top 3 picks from everything that you've learned?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Here, let me play some music. Doop, doop, doop.
Yeah, the thing, I think, so much of the reasons things have gone well and worked out were because of my wife. And like I said, she's just an incredible teammate and an awesome person to be around. And I think that this is different than, I guess, being a dad, but part of my dad responsibilities tie into being a husband to my spouse, and for us, that's our family dynamic. The being able to get over the spats or the little here and there's that get annoying quickly, that's been critical, because then things go back to normal and we get back to having a good time. And really that has a chain reaction into everything else that goes on, at least from the freelance side, because if your mind's consumed with something that's going sideways in your relationship or whatever, it's hard to do your best work. And then that shows up when you're presenting it or while you're doing it. And then that has it's kind of a cycle. Then that goes back into stresses that get introduced into your family. And then the work is bad, you see where that goes. So I'd say one thing is figure out how to fight fair and forgive fast. That's one big one I think that I've learned, and it doesn't have anything really to do with work, but that's advice I'd give myself in reverse. If I could go back to the beginning of all of this, I would say, hey, this worked out. Maybe don't do freelance if you don't have those things that I mentioned earlier. Full-time freelance, if you're not really good at those things, being able to do work. Oh yeah, I'll say that one. That'll be the last one. Don't jump into freelance if you're not good at sales and organized and you don't know how to do your accounting and all that. I mean, you get yourself in a lot of trouble too doing that financially. And then maybe the last thing is, if you are going to do work for yourself, be fast at your work. Because if you're fast at your work, then either you have a ton of optionality. You can either do more work and make more money, which is exciting, right? More money is nice. Or you can be done and you can go play trains or play Legos or Barbies or whatever you got to do. And if you're fast at your work, you get your time back, and your time is the only thing you can't. We all get the same amount roughly. You can't buy more. It's a precious commodity.
So on a scale of 5 out of 5, how's parenting?
Parenting's awesome. I would give it A++ would do again. I like parenting. I grew up with my dad left when I was really young, and my mom worked all the time. She wasn't really around. So for me, there's a huge responsibility personally to be a present parent and be a good parent, because I know what it looks like to kind of not have that around so much. And hopefully that's not too much of a drag, but it is what it is, but it really does drive a lot of how I operate as a dad. And when when I'd rather look at my phone, versus, go play a game or something that's, maybe it seems silly to me as an adult man. It's the things I wished for when I was a kid that I had, and now I have the opportunity to break that cycle and do the right thing and be present. And so that's a 5 for me all day out of 5 to be able to do that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Rad Dad Show. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends and let them know about this podcast. Every subscriber helps. See you next time.